The next section for the research methodology is the procedure. Now, the procedure, or we call it basically the data collection procedure, and the other one is the data analysis procedure. And the first one, it tells us of the detail of your research procedure. Now, what will be included? First, what will your participants or respondents do in sequence? Next, how will you collect the data? Number 3, it's very connected in order, the order of the steps occurred. Remember in my research design, I simply have it in a brief summary. But from my research design, I need to spell out in details how will my participants be involved in the study. Like in the first one, they need to take the pretest for attitude, pretest for motivation, pretest for engagement, and pretest for achievement. Then they will be under a study, under a treatment for 1 quarter. Then after a quarter, they will take the test again. The number of days for you to gather it, or in just one setup, the time length, you need to spell it out in your procedure. And please do not forget this one. We need to observe some ethical standards in gathering your data. For example, let's take the example. We have my pen first. A researcher interviewed children individually. So it's an interview in their school for how long? One session that lasted 20 minutes on average. Remember, it's very, if you will do interviews, you need to spell out, is it individually or by group? They call it FGD, focus group discussions. The researcher explained to each child that he or she will be told what will happen. The researcher will tell 2 stories and then we'll ask some questions after each story. Now, all sessions were videotaped, so data could later be coded. Now, what are some examples? Let me give you an example here. This one. I need to start with my ethical procedure. Now, for my ethical procedure, if you check, the researcher sought permission from the secondary school administrator where the study was conducted. And once the permission was granted, the researcher sought the permission of the participants, and an ethical note was returned as a verification of consent. A copy of the ethical note and the researcher's letter is in Appendix B. The next. And the next one, the participants will answer. The participants will answer the questionnaire. Then, what will happen next? The group were tested for equivalency. The first group went through the team-based flipped classroom. Then they take 10-item researcher-made test. And then you continue until you need to spell out what will you do until the end of your study. Here's another example. This is the ethical part, ethical considerations. Here's the procedural type on what will they do in the study. Now, there are some ethical standards to consider. First is we seek permission. Now, if the research will be conducted to a group of students, like you'll conduct it to MVCA students or to MVC students or to MVC employees, you need to seek permission from the administrator. So for example, if you conduct a study among MVCA students, seek permission from the principal. If you'll conduct it among MVC employees, seek permission from the college president. So again, it's very important. Wherever we conduct a study, we need to seek the permission of the school, of the administrator. The second one, if the data gathering involves a class, you need to seek permission from the subject teacher. It's very important since the subject teacher will be the one to arrange a schedule for you. The third one, now this is a main concern from last year's research. Seek permission from your research participants. For example, if you'll get their grades, their GPA, or if you let them answer the survey instrument, you need to seek permission from the research participants. Send a formal letter and ask them to comply with a note of verification to say that they will agree. Ma'am, what if di sila mo agree? Baka mabuhat. Because you see, the research participant has the freedom to choose whether or not he or she will join you in your study. And this one, if the participants are minors, seek permission from their parents. Do not give the letter directly to the participant, especially if the participant is a minor. You need to seek permission from their parents. And once the parents are okay with a note of verification, then you need to have it with the minor. The next, we write an ethics statement. In your letter, you need to place there that the data, the name will not be disclosed, the data will be taken in private, and have the data privacy notice. There is a format for the Data Privacy Act. That's a Republic Act. Then the third one, once you will have the participants' data, you should not disclose any participant's name. For example, even if you have their grades, you just see that it's matched. The participant 1 in the grades is also the same as participant 1 who answered the survey question. So that place there, Yacon, Barnuevo, Glang, Brofas, no. We just code them as participants 1, 2, 3, or 4. So these are some ethical standards. Next, let me continue. For the data analysis procedure, we describe. Now, what will be your basis here? You need to go back to your statement of the problem. You need to spell out. I think in my IB class, I asked you to write all your SOP. Then next, how will I measure this one? For example, question number 1, what is the color of the leaf of the mung bean? How will you measure it? Observation. What data is needed? The color, so descriptive. So you need to describe the analysis for each research question. For example, is there a relationship between attitude towards math and academic performance? What will you do? You will correlate. Therefore, it's inferential, right? We go back to our stat class. We need our test that will be used will be the Pearson product moment correlation, or the Pearson R. The next one. Now, once you will have the data analysis, follow the sequence of the statement of the problem. You can group the same treatments together. Example. Let's go back to question number 1. What is the student's attitude towards math? Question number 2, what is the level of their academic performance? Question number 3, is there a relationship between attitude towards math and academic performance? Now, questions 1 and 2 will be descriptive. So I can write them in the same paragraph. Say, to measure the attitude towards mathematics and students' academic performance, descriptive statistics will be used. Now, if you'll use descriptive statistics, let's just have two, okay? For uniformity, we'll only solve the mean and the standard deviation. Next, and to interpret, we provide a qualitative description. Example, if my GPA is 85, what is the qualitative description? Is it outstanding, proficient, or outstanding, satisfactory, fairly satisfactory, poor, needs improvement? You need to have a qualitative description. Next, if you are using an instrument, you need to add the scoring guide. How will you score? Then, if you have a hypothesis, like in number 3, what's our hypothesis? There is no relationship, significant relationship between attitude and academic performance. Then I'll state my test of hypothesis. What test will I use? Then indicate that I will test it at 0.05 level of significance. Now, here are some tests, some examples. Let me just highlight, okay? This is a very long page in my study because I have so many variables, but I'll just cite you one. In the first paragraph, I enumerated all the tests I will use. The next paragraph tells me how will I measure statement of the problem number 1. That's it. For example, in the study of Ilumba, this is their, I guess, questions SOP 1, 2, and 3. They will use descriptive statistics. You can, that is to check the level of memory retention, the ease of reading, and the time spent in reading. Yes. Question 1, question 2, and question 3. They say they should include the mean and the standard deviation. The next, since they will compare font 1, font 2, and font 3, then there are 3 groups. They will use analysis of variance to determine the significant difference in students' ease of reading, time spent reading, and memory retention with different font types. For example, you can also say here, I will use analysis of variance to differentiate the mung beans played with classical music, the mung beans played with rock music, and the mung beans with no music. I say Pearson product moment correlation will be used to determine if there's a relationship between attitude towards math and academic performance. Now, what are different tests to be used? I forgot to place here. If it's descriptive only, you simply describe. Then we say descriptive statistics. What will be included? Mean and standard deviation. Now, before we only use the large sample size. But for this class, I also considered small sample size, just in case some groups will have less than 30. Now, if you compare the pre-test and post-test of same group, example, my mass, then I'm on a diet, then after 1 month, I'll measure my mass again. I'll compare the pre-test and post-test. For large samples, we call it paired, sorry, there's a missing word, paired samples t-test. If the sample size is small, you use Wilcoxon signed ranks test. Next, if we compare posts of two groups, like one Hmong Bin group listens to classical music, one Hmong Bin group listens to rock music, I'll compare the two in terms of height. Then we use independent sample t-test for large. For small, we use Mann-Whitney U-test. If you compare 3 or more groups, we use analysis of variance for large samples. For small, we use Kruskal-Wallis ANOVA. If you correlate groups, like we correlate attitude and academic performance, we use Pearson product moment correlation or Pearson R. Actually, there are so many correlational tests, but we'll just deal with this one. Ma'am, how will I solve for all of this? No need to worry. There is a specific software, the SPSS, wherein we can use to do this. What you need to do, you need to name what type of test you will use. Now, here are some tips before I'll end. Always write the method section in the past tense. But let me clarify that one. For the meantime, since you are writing for your proposal defense, you will write it in future tense. Example, the participants will take a 10-item test. But in your final paper, you write it in past tense. The participants took a 10-item test. The next, if you need to focus on brevity, you need to provide enough details so that the next set of participants or researcher can replicate your study. Example, Denise told me yesterday of the social media usage of Chippy's group and also in relationship to anxiety. She replicated this time, but to another variable, to academic performance. That's okay. You have a different variable. Then the last one, we write it in APA format. Hope I'll have time to summarize with you the APA format. Then the next one, if you have a rough draft, hopefully we can have your research advisors next week. Then show your method section. And lastly, you proofread your papers for typos, grammar problems, and spelling errors. You know what? How do you know that you are already saturated? They say, you already arrived in the limit of doing your research paper. Personally, it's the time when I say, kasukaon na kayo kagbasa sa akong papel. That means, kapoy na kagbasa. But hangtod yun, di pa kakasukaon nagbasa sa yung papel, check and check and check. And let me end this with this one. Jesus' methodology in winning souls. It's in a Christ-centered method. And it's more on follow me. They say, what's Jesus' method? He mingled with people. He provided their needs. He won their confidence. Before he had bidden them, follow me. So that's it for our methodology.